My name is Claire. I'm 29 years old and I live in a small flat near the sea in Brighton. It's a peaceful town, the kind where mornings smell like coffee and salt water, and the wind always carries the sound of waves. My window faces the coast, and some evenings I sit there for hours, watching the sun melt into the ocean. To people who know me now, I seem fine. I go to work. I smile at the cashier. I walk by the beach. They think I have a quiet, simple life. But what they don't know is that inside, I'm still holding a goodbye that I never said. It's been 1 year, one long, quiet year, since I left someone who loved me deeply. And I didn't say anything. Not a note, not a word. Just a closed door and silence. Sometimes when I hear a certain song or smell his cologne on a stranger, I feel it all rushing back, the warmth I once had and the regret I carry now. This is not a love story. It's a story about silence and what happens when you walk away too quietly. 1 year ago, my world looked different. I lived with a man named Daniel. He was 31, thoughtful, warm, always smiling with his eyes before his lips. He had a quiet way of making things feel safe, like the world outside could be chaos, but inside our little flat, nothing could hurt me. Daniel loved the simple things, morning coffee with toast and jam, long walks even when it rained, reading old poetry out loud just to hear how the words danced. He'd leave early for work, but always kiss my forehead gently, as if saying, "I'll come back. I always will." We weren't perfect, but there was peace in our home. He'd ask how my day was. He listened, even when I spoke in circles. He noticed the small things, if I wore a different perfume, if my voice sounded tired. He cared, and I knew it. I remember one night in October, we sat on the floor eating Chinese takeaway, laughing about how terrible the movie was on TV. He looked at me mid-laugh and said, "You're my favorite person, Claire. Just being with you makes everything feel right." I smiled, but inside something whispered, "Why don't you feel the same?" And that was the beginning, not of the end, but of the quiet distance that would slowly grow between us. Daniel loved me. That much I knew. But love is strange. Sometimes, when someone gives you everything and you still feel empty, you start to wonder if the problem is with you. That's how I felt. He was too kind, too gentle, too good, and I was too lost. It wasn't his fault. It was mine. Every time he looked at me with those soft eyes, I felt a wave of guilt, not comfort. I would sit beside him on the couch, his arm around me, his heart wide open, and still I felt far away. Like I was watching my life through a glass window, present, but not really there. I never told him what I was feeling. How could I? He hadn't done anything wrong. He gave love like sunlight, steady, warm, expecting nothing. And I just didn't know how to receive it. At night, when he fell asleep beside me, breathing softly, I'd lie there staring at the ceiling, asking myself, why don't I feel it? Why doesn't this feel like love? But I had no answer, only silence. And that silence started growing between us, one unspoken thought at a time. It didn't happen all at once. The distance between us came like slow rain, quiet, steady, and unnoticed at first. I stopped waiting for his texts during the day. I started spending more time alone, reading in cafes instead of waiting for him at home. When he asked, "Are you okay?" I always said, "Just tired." And he believed me because Daniel trusted me. He thought love could fix anything, even silence. He kept trying. He brought home flowers. He surprised me with my favorite pastries on Sundays. He'd say, "I miss you," even when we're in the same room. And I would nod, but say nothing. I didn't know how to explain it, how the love he gave me was slowly becoming a weight I couldn't carry. Not because it was heavy, but because it wasn't mine. I started avoiding his touch, not out of anger, just discomfort. Every hug, every kiss felt like a lie I was too afraid to admit. Sometimes I caught him staring at me, his eyes full of questions he never asked. And every time I looked away, I was slipping away from him, and he could feel it, but neither of us knew how to stop it. It was a Tuesday evening. Daniel was working late, and the apartment was quiet, too quiet. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall, my heart pounding like I had just run a marathon, but I hadn't moved. For days, maybe weeks, the thought had been growing inside me. I need to leave. Not to escape Daniel, but to escape the lie I was living. He deserved more than half love, more than silence, more than someone who smiled on the outside but felt nothing on the inside. So I opened the closet and slowly pulled out my small suitcase, the same one we used on our trip to Devon. My hands were shaking as I packed. A few clothes, my notebook, and the old scarf my mom gave me. I didn't take much. I wasn't sure where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stay. I looked around the room we once shared, the photo frame on the nightstand, the mug he always left by the window. Everything looked still, like time had stopped. And maybe in that moment it had. I thought about leaving a note, just one line, one explanation, but I didn't. I zipped the bag, grabbed my coat, and walked out. No goodbye, no sound, just the soft click of the door and silence behind me. The train station was nearly empty. It was late, past 10 p.m., and the only sounds were the soft hum of the vending machines and the distant voice announcing departures. I bought a ticket to London. No plan, no reason, just distance. As I sat by the window, the train started to move, slowly pulling me away from everything I had known. The lights of Brighton faded behind me, but my thoughts didn't. I watched the dark countryside blur past, but all I could see was Daniel's face. The way he'd smile when I laughed, the way his eyes softened when he said goodnight. I wondered if he was home yet, if he had noticed my suitcase was gone, if he had called my name, if he was scared, confused, broken. I turned off my phone. I couldn't bear to see the missed calls. I wasn't ready to hear his voice, not when I had nothing to say. The train rocked gently, but there was no comfort in it, only guilt. Heavy, sharp, endless. I thought leaving would make me feel free, but I had never felt more trapped than I did on that train. I wasn't running towards something, I was just running away. I arrived in London just after midnight. The city felt big, loud, and unfamiliar. A sharp contrast to the quiet I left behind. I took a cab to my friend Mia's flat. She had offered her guest room weeks ago, not knowing I would ever take it. When I arrived, she hugged me tightly and said nothing. She didn't ask why. She just handed me a blanket and said, "Get some rest." The room was small, with a single bed and a desk by the window. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the silence. My suitcase lay unopened on the floor. I didn't feel like unpacking. I didn't feel like anything. I turned on my phone. 12 missed calls, all from Daniel. No messages, just his name over and over again. I held the phone to my chest and closed my eyes. Tears came slowly, not loud, not violent, just quiet streams down my cheeks. Not because I missed him, not because I wanted to go back, but because I had broken something gentle, something that had only ever tried to love me. I didn't sleep that night. I just lay there, listening to the sound of my own heartbeat and wondering what kind of person leaves without saying goodbye. Days turned into weeks. I found a job at a small cafe just a few blocks from Mia's flat. It was quiet work, making tea, wiping tables, handing out smiles I didn't really feel. Customers came and went, some kind, some rude, some completely invisible, but none of them knew who I was, and that made it easier. People saw me and thought I was fine. They saw a girl who had moved to London for a fresh start, someone independent, someone brave. But I wasn't brave. I was broken. Every morning I stood behind the counter, pretending. I'd stir milk into coffee while thinking of Daniel's hands doing the same thing in our kitchen. I'd hear someone laugh and remember how his laugh filled the room like sunlight. I'd walk past couples in the park and feel my chest tighten, because I once had that, and I walked away from it. I didn't tell anyone the truth, not Mia, not my coworkers, not myself even. I kept waiting for the regret to fade, but it didn't. It settled into me like a shadow, quiet, steady, and always there. Time was moving, but I wasn't. Regret has a strange way of finding you in the smallest, quietest things. One rainy morning, I walked past a street market. A man was selling handmade candles, and one of them smelled exactly like the one Daniel used to light during our dinners at home. Lavender and sandalwood. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. I didn't buy the candle. I couldn't even look at it again. Another day, I saw a dog that looked like the one Daniel always stopped to pet on our walks. And then there was his old jumper, the soft, navy one I had taken without thinking. It still smelled like him. Even after months, it still smelled like him. I kept it hidden in my suitcase, tucked beneath clothes I never wore. Sometimes I'd take it out just to hold it close. Not because I wanted him back, but because I wanted to feel something real, even if it hurt. The world kept spinning. People kept laughing, running, moving forward. But I felt stuck inside a memory that wouldn't let go. Love didn't chase me, but memories did, and they were everywhere. One evening, I sat on the floor of Mia's guest room with my journal in my lap. The lights were dim, the window slightly open. A cold breeze touched my skin, but I didn't close it. I stared at the blank page for a long time. Then, slowly, I began to write. I thought leaving would set me free, but I feel more lost than ever. I traded honesty for silence, and now I carry a pain I never speak about. Daniel didn't deserve this. He gave me calm. He gave me patience. And I walked away without even a goodbye. My hand trembled as I wrote each word. Tears started falling before I noticed them. I had told myself for months that I needed to leave, that I was protecting both of us. But the truth was, I was afraid. Afraid of confrontation, afraid of hurting him, afraid of staying, and afraid of going. I thought I was doing the kind thing by being quiet, but silence is its own kind of cruelty. I closed the journal and held it against my chest. That night, I didn't cry out loud. I just sat in stillness, surrounded by regret. And for the first time, I whispered into the dark, "I'm sorry, Daniel. I really am." The next morning, Mia made tea and sat across from me at the small kitchen table. She looked at me quietly for a moment, then said, "You haven't been sleeping, Claire. I can see it in your eyes." I didn't answer. She reached over, placed her hand gently on mine, and said, "I don't want to push you, but it's okay to talk. Whatever you're carrying, you don't have to carry it alone." Something inside me cracked. I told her everything. About Daniel, about the night I left, about the silence, and the weight of it that still sat on my chest every single day. When I finished, Mia didn't judge me. She didn't say I was cruel. She just nodded softly and said, "You left because you were hurting, and sometimes when we're hurting, we don't make the best choices." I looked down, ashamed. Then she added, "But protecting yourself doesn't always mean silence. You owe him the truth, Claire, not to fix things, but to set both of you free." I looked at her, and for a moment, I felt like a child, unsure, scared, waiting for permission to be honest. "It's not too late to say something," she whispered, "even if it's just for closure." Her words stayed with me for days, not because they were dramatic, but because they were real. That night, after Mia went to bed, I sat alone in the kitchen with my laptop open. The screen glowed softly in the dark as I typed Daniel's name into the search bar. I hadn't looked him up since I left. It felt wrong, like opening a door I had no right to walk through anymore. But Mia's words echoed in my mind. You owe him the truth. So I searched. His number was no longer active. I tried calling once, just to see. A robotic voice answered, "This number is no longer in service." I searched his social media profiles. All of them were quiet. No new posts, no updates, no photos. It was like he had disappeared from the online world completely. I stared at the screen for a long time. A strange emptiness filled me, not just because I couldn't find him, but because I had no idea what his life looked like anymore. Was he okay? Had he moved on? Did he hate me? I closed the laptop and held my face in my hands. I had waited too long. And now, maybe the chance to speak had already passed. The next morning, I woke up early. The sky was still gray, and the streets outside were wet from the night's rain. I made tea, sat by the window, and pulled out my journal. But this time, I wasn't writing for myself. I was writing for Daniel. I tore out a fresh page and started. Dear Daniel, I don't know where you are or if you'll ever read this, but I need to say what I never had the courage to say before. The words began to flow, shaky at first, but then like a quiet storm. I told him everything, that I was scared, that I felt lost even while I was with him, that he was never the problem, I was. I wrote about the silence I carried, the guilt that grew inside me every day, and how I had spent the past year wishing I could go back. Not to undo the past, but to at least give him the truth. You were good to me, better than I ever deserved, and I never said goodbye, not because I didn't care, but because I cared too much, and I didn't know how to say the words without breaking both of us. I signed it Claire. When I finished, I held the letter to my chest. I didn't mail it. I didn't try to find an address. I folded it gently and placed it in a small wooden box. Maybe one day I'd be brave enough to give it to him, but that day wasn't today. A full year had passed since I left Brighton, but time doesn't always heal. Sometimes it just softens the edges of the wound. One Saturday morning, I boarded a train back to the city I once called home. Not to stay, just to visit. To see what it felt like to stand in the places I used to walk with him. Brighton was the same. The sea still whispered against the shore. The seagulls still cried above the rooftops. The coffee shop where we used to sit still had the same blue chairs by the window. I walked slowly past our old street, past the bookstore we liked, and finally to the bench near the pier, the one where we used to sit on cold evenings, holding hands in silence, not because we had nothing to say, but because everything felt full. I sat down, wrapped my coat tightly around me, and looked out at the ocean. I wondered if he had sat here too, if he had looked for me in the waves, if he had missed me, even for a little while. I didn't cry, not this time, but my chest ached with a quiet sadness, not for what we had, but for how I left it behind, without goodbye, without peace. And standing there again, in the city we once shared, I realized something. Some places never forget you, even when the people in them move on. Now, as I sit here writing these words, I think about how different things could have been if I had just spoken, just once. If I had sat across from Daniel, looked into his eyes, and said, I'm lost, but it's not your fault. If I had held his hand and told him the truth, before walking away. Maybe it wouldn't hurt this much now. But I didn't. I left without goodbye. And I still regret it. Not because I want him back, but because I took his love and left it unanswered. Because I walked away from someone good without giving him the ending he deserved. If you're listening to my story right now and you're thinking of leaving someone, don't leave with silence. Say goodbye. Speak your truth, even if it's messy, even if it hurts, because silence stays. It follows you, and one day it speaks louder than any words you are too afraid to say. So wherever you are, whatever you're holding inside, let it out. Let them know. Don't make the same mistake I did. A few weeks after visiting Brighton, I received a message I never expected. It was from an old friend of Daniel's, Mark. We hadn't spoken in over a year. The message was short. Claire, I don't mean to bring up the past, but Daniel asked me for your address a few months ago. He said he just wanted to send you something, nothing more. I didn't give it to him, but I thought you should know. He still thinks about you. My hands shook as I read it. He had looked for me. Even after everything, the silence, the leaving, the pain, he still wanted to reach out. Not in anger, not to demand anything, just to send something. Maybe a letter, maybe closure. I sat with the message in my hands for a long time, feeling the weight of everything I hadn't said, everything I had run away from. I didn't reply to Mark. There was nothing to say. But that night I took the letter I had written, the one I kept in the box, and I read it out loud, alone, word by word, as if Daniel could somehow hear it through the quiet. When I finished, I whispered, "Wherever you are, I hope you're okay, and I'm sorry it took me this long to find my voice." A few days later, I stood by the river with the letter in my hand, the same letter I had written months ago, folded neatly, edges worn from reading it over and over. It wasn't for Daniel anymore. It was for me, a way to release the guilt, to say goodbye, finally. The wind was soft that evening. The sky was painted with warm orange and pale blue, like the world was saying, "It's okay to move on." I didn't cry, not because I didn't feel anything, but because the sadness had changed. It was no longer sharp, just gentle, like the fading echo of a song I once knew by heart. I opened my hand and let the letter fall into the water. It floated for a moment, then slowly drifted away, carrying all the words I never said, all the weight I had carried. As I watched it disappear, I whispered softly, "Goodbye, Daniel." This time I said it, not to him, but to the part of myself that had been stuck in that moment for so long. And in that quiet, with only the sound of the river and the wind around me, I felt a little free. After that day by the river, something in me began to shift. I started doing small things I had once loved, reading poetry again, walking through the park without headphones, sitting in quiet cafes, not to hide from the world, but to feel part of it again. I signed up for a weekend art class, just to try. My hands were shaky with the brush at first, but the colors felt like freedom. Every stroke on the canvas was a tiny reminder, you're still here, you're still learning. I smiled more, not for others, for me. There were still nights when I missed him, not Daniel exactly, but the version of myself I used to be when I was with him. The girl who was loved so gently and didn't know how to receive it. But I didn't hate her anymore. I understood her now. She was scared, she was broken, she was trying. And so was I. I wasn't healed, but I was healing, piece by piece, word by word, step by quiet step. One cold evening in early December, I was cleaning out a drawer in Mia's flat. I found my old phone, the one I hadn't used since I left Brighton. Out of curiosity, I charged it and turned it on. It lit up slowly, and then the notifications came. Old messages, missed calls, one voicemail from Daniel, dated just 2 days after I left. My heart froze. For a moment, I thought about deleting it, pretending I never saw it, but I didn't. I pressed play. His voice came through, soft and steady. Claire. I don't know what happened. I came home and you were gone. No note, no message, just gone. He paused, breathing shakily. I'm not angry, just confused. I keep wondering if I did something wrong, or if you were hurting and didn't know how to say it. Another pause. Wherever you are, I hope you're safe. I still love you, but I won't chase you. If you ever want to talk, I'll be here, even if it's just to say goodbye. The message ended. I sat there for a long time, staring at nothing. The tears didn't come right away. They waited, because that message, the one I was too scared to face, had been waiting for me all this time. That night, I went for a walk. The streets were quiet, dressed in winter fog. I passed glowing windows, heard distant laughter, saw couples walking close, sharing warmth I once had. Daniel's voice echoed in my mind, even if it's just to say goodbye. I held my coat tight, my steps slow, and for the first time in a long while, I wasn't running from the past. I was walking through it. I didn't call him. I didn't write back. I didn't know where he lived or if he was still waiting, but I whispered into the night, "Thank you, and I'm sorry for everything, for leaving the way I did, for not giving us the ending we both deserved." The wind didn't answer, but I didn't need it to. That goodbye wasn't for him anymore. It was for me. Because some doors don't close with a sound, they close quietly with acceptance. And in that moment, standing beneath the pale streetlight, hands in my pockets, tears on my cheek, I felt it. The end. Not sharp, not cruel, just soft and real. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening to my story. It wasn't full of smiles or perfect endings, but it was real. I don't share this to be pitied. I share it because I know I'm not the only one who's ever walked away in silence, carrying words they were too afraid to speak. Sometimes we leave not because we stop caring, but because we never learned how to stay. And if you're someone standing at that edge, between silence and honesty, I hope you choose honesty, even if your voice shakes, even if it hurts, because silence stays with you. So speak, say goodbye, Say what you need to say before it becomes a weight you can't carry. And if you're healing from something similar, know this: you're not alone. You're allowed to start over. You're allowed to make mistakes and still grow. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, and share it with someone who might need it too. Tell me in the comments, have you ever left without goodbye or wished someone hadn't? More emotional and simple stories are coming soon. Until then, be gentle with others and kinder with yourself.